episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the podcast where we bring the science of the mind and the soul of the healing into one empowering space. I'm your host Avik, and today's conversation is deeply personal for so many of us. So let me ask you something, dear listeners. Have you ever had a moment where food felt more powerful than your willpower? Also, where one bite turned into a binge and you were left with guilt, shame, and that itching question, what's wrong with me? Right? So, if you have been there, you are not alone. And more importantly, there is nothing wrong with you. Yes. Our guest today is Amber Abila. So, welcome to the show, Amber.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Amazing, amazing. So, Amber, like before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners. Dear listeners, Amber is here to rewrite that story. So, she is a transformational coach helping women stop binge eating and emotional overeating by rewiring the brain, not relying on willpower, not restricting, but creating a new relationship with the food from the inside out. So Amber knows this journey because she's worked with, like, from health conscious on the outside to struggling in the secret. She tried every method under the sun. So until she discovered that the key wasn't in discipline, it was in the brain. Yeah. So, dear listeners, if you are ready to feel normal, free, and in control around food again, then this episode is for you. So, welcome to the show again, Amber.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And yes, that's definitely what I help people with is binge eating after many years of struggling it with myself too.
Mm, amazing. That's really, really amazing. And yeah, so I mean, uh, you have said that for years you looked like you had it together, like, but behind the scenes, food was running the show. So, what was the internal struggle like for you, if you can share?
Yeah, so a little bit about my story. My journey started when back in 2015, I decided to start calorie counting to lose some weight. And I did start to lose weight, but I slowly became more and more strict with my calorie counting. I wanted to lose more weight even faster. And that was when a few months later, I had my first binge. And I remember it so clearly. It was around Christmas time, and there was cookies all around, and I had been so good. I hadn't eaten any, but I went downstairs. I was home alone, and I thought, okay, let me just have one cookie. And I had one cookie, and then it turned into another and another and another until I had had 7 cookies. I was so full, I was bloated, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I ruined all my progress," but that was a one-time thing. I won't let it happen again. Now, it was not a one-time thing, and it continued to happen more and more frequently. So at first it was, every other week, and then it was every week, and then it turned into every day until it got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. And as I mentioned, it was like no one knew about this in my secret struggle. And I had a great job. I had great friendships and families, and
Mm,
I had everything going for me, but I couldn't figure out my relationship with food.
mm,
So I first tried to go to therapy for binge eating, which is where a lot of people go. And therapy can be helpful for a lot of things, but binge eating was not actually recognized as an official eating disorder until
mm,
2013. And because of that, it's only a little over 10 years ago. A lot of the research is really outdated and not current on how we know the brain works and how to change the brain to stop binge eating. So while I went to therapy, I might have got some awareness and insights, but I never really learned the tools of how to eat like a normal eater again.
mm,
And that led me into my own research and journey to really start learning about how the brain works. And once I
mm.
realized, I had heard on a blog post that
Okay.
binge eating could just be a habit. It was just
Mm,
something that we got triggered to do at one point, and then every time we ate, we reinforced that habit until our brain was literally wired to be a binge eater. And once I
mm,
had that big insight, it really changed everything for me because it allowed me to see how I wasn't broken, how there wasn't anything wrong with me. And in fact,
mm,
I had a very healthy brain that simply got used to binge eating and it was trying to help make my life easier by automating this habit. And it thought it was helping me survive. But of course, we know that binge eating did not
mm,
help me survive and only made my life infinitely worse. But it was a really big insight for me to learn that recovery could be simplified once I started viewing it as just a habit.
mm. Sure. So thank you so much for sharing this. And uh, so, so like, what was the turning point when you realized that this isn't about food? It's all about how my brain is weird. So,
Mhm.
I mean, how would you say?
Yeah, so what I had this insight around is
Mm,
we have these two parts of our brain. Now we have many parts of brain, but for simplicity purposes today, we'll say we have two parts. We have this higher part of our brain that is our logical part of our brain that has our goals in mind, that knows that we want to be healthy and live a long, happy life. And then we have this lower part of our brain, which is very automatic. It is like our animal brain. So if you've ever heard someone call it our lizard brain or our um, like, just the lower part of our brain that is automatic, habitual. It doesn't have our goals in mind, right? It just acts according to what it can help us survive to do. So our urges around food and binge eating, they are coming from this lower part of our brain. And that's
mm,
actually really good news because that means that our urges actually have no control over us. So I know very well that in
mm,
the moment, it can feel like we're out of control. That I used to describe it as I felt like I was a ghost out of my body and I wouldn't wake up until I noticed all the wrappers around me and I thought, oh no, what did I do? But what's actually happening in that moment is we still are making a conscious choice of I'm going to binge right now, but sometimes it can just happen so quickly that we don't even recognize it's a conscious choice. And so these urges coming from our lower part of our brain, a few qualities of them are they are one harmless, so they cannot hurt us because they are just
mhm,
thoughts that are creating a sensation in our body. So they can't hurt us. They don't have any power over us, meaning because they are just thoughts, if we sit with them, we're not going to die. And we know that logically, but sometimes it was really helpful for me just to remind myself that during the binge of when I was getting these urges of, hey, Amber, you're not going to die right now. You're just having thoughts. They might be uncomfortable, but you're going to be okay. And the third quality of our binge urges is that they're meaningless. So it
mm,
is good to investigate them to a point and see like why might they be coming up and get that awareness. But there becomes a point where we really don't need to look that much deeper into them.
mm,
And we just need to think of them as brain junk, as kind of like spam mail that we can just delete away because we know they're not something that we really want to do. And we know this because if you were to ask yourself, do I want to binge when you're not having these cravings and these urges? You would say, absolutely not, because that's your higher brain coming in and telling you what you actually want to do. So we know that these thoughts aren't true. We know that they can't hurt us, and we know that we're safe to sit with them until they pass by. Now, once they pass by, this is really where the magic happens. When we get triggered to eat, overeat or binge, and we don't do it, our brain updates in that moment and it starts to learn hey, this is not something she wants to do anymore. This is not a habit she needs to have. And it starts to weaken that brain
mm,
pathway. And over many, many times of having these urgent cravings come up and not acting on it, the brain pathway literally rewires itself. And so it goes away. So we no longer have the brain of someone who binge eats.
mm. Wow. That's really an amazing side of the discussion, I would say, dear listeners. It's a really a great, great conversation. And also, I'd love to add here, that moment of self-compassion you described is really, really powerful. I mean,
Mhm.
so many of us stay stuck in that loop of try harder instead of asking, like, what if this isn't the willpower problem at all? So
Mhm.
that's really amazing. Yeah, yeah. And like you talk about rewiring the brain to stop binge eating. That really sounds both fascinating and hopeful. But if you can explain, like in simple terms, like what that actually means.
Mhm. Yeah, so as I mentioned,
Hmm.
Our brain is a collection of different pathways, right? We have different habits, we have different thought patterns, we have different emotions that we think habitually. And our brain makes our habits and thoughts and actions habitual because it saves energy. If we had to think every time we went in our car, okay, we have to sit down, we're gonna do our seatbelt, we're gonna check our mirrors, we're gonna take the keys, we're gonna put them in the engine. Like it's too much brain processing. So our brain makes it easier by automating it. So we don't have to think about it. We just do all of that automatically. And so, because our brain has formed all these habits in different areas, we want to think about those habits came from basically, we get some sort of reward. So, when we do something that's positive, our brain will release dopamine or a positive emotion to help reinforce that to do again. And the food often does that for us, where we get this hit of dopamine from it, and that tells our brain, hey, this is good. Let's do this again. And so it starts to learn that over time. And what happens is these collections of brain pathways essentially get stronger and stronger and stronger because it's like we're taking a check mark on our brain
Mm.
of thank you brain, we would like to do this again. Thank you brain, we would like to do this again because we keep doing it over and over and over again.
Right.
So instead, we want to take a check mark on the other side of our brain, basically saying, "Hey brain, I don't want to do this anymore." And when we stop acting on the urges around food, um, it's kind of like a Google document where it deletes that sentence and it gets rid of it because it doesn't need it anymore. Now, the way to reinforce the new brain pathway, so what that would look like is if you don't binge and you instead take some deep breaths, or you go outside for a walk, or I'm going to give you for the show notes, I have an audio that you can listen to that helps you stop a binge in its tracks. So it's a 7-minute audio. If you do that, you do some techniques here to help calm your nervous system in that moment. Then what we really need to do that's so important is we have to celebrate ourselves for that new thing we just did. What a lot of people will do is they'll get through a craving around food and they'll say, "Oh, thank goodness I made it through, moving on with my life." And they don't take time to celebrate themselves.
Yeah.
And celebration is like super glue for our new brain pathways. And so by celebrating ourselves and saying, good job, you did it. I'm so proud of you. Go you. That's going to make it so much easier that the next time you think about binge eating, you'll remember, oh, remember that time I listened to this audio, or remember this time I took some deep breaths and I was really proud of myself for that. That memory will come up and allow you to do that instead and help to start change these habits.
Exactly, exactly true. Wow. And wow. So like how does this approach differ from the traditional dieting or even the talk therapy?
Hmm. So, traditional diets, they only focus on your actions and telling you what to do. A lot of people like that because it feels like we have a plan. We have answers now. Eat this, don't eat this. And then all we have to do is follow that and we'll get what we want. But in reality, diets are very ineffective because our brain just doesn't work like that. And our brain is really sensitive to changes around food. And so what happens in reality is 95% of diets fail, meaning that 95% of people who lose weight dieting will gain it all back or more. So we know that this tool is not very effective. And a lot of times, dieting can get into, there's a lot of reasons why dieting doesn't work. And that's a whole nother deep dive. But really at the core of it, it's just focusing on telling yourself to do differently. And that's requiring willpower of, I just need to try harder to stick with it. And our willpower is finite. It doesn't last all day. It might work for the morning hours for a little bit, but then we give up
Mm,
because we can't keep our motivation up that whole time. Um, what
exactly.
we yeah, what we instead need to do is really focus on our thoughts and our feelings around food because those are what are driving our actions to eat. So, for example, if we're thinking all day, I
Right.
need food to relieve this stress, we're going to have desire for food and we're going to want to eat. Right? Even if we're on the best diet in the world, if you still have that thought, I need food to relieve the stress, that diet's not gonna work because our thoughts are doing that thing. But if instead we change our thoughts to, I know how to handle stress and I can handle discomfort in my body. I know how to sit with this emotion. This emotion isn't that big of a deal. Then we feel calm and then we don't feel the desire to eat food so much because we want to handle the emotion. So, just a simple change in our thoughts can often be what makes the difference between something working and something not working. But pretty much all other approaches, whether it's dieting, whether it's a GLP-1 like Ozempic,
Mm.
they're only focusing on changing the outside circumstance and not our internal being.
Understood. Okay. That really resonates, I'd say. And it's like we have been treating the symptom, overeating, instead of the system that created it. So,
Mhm,
this brain based approach, I mean, it really sounds like a breakthrough. Yeah. Thank you so much.
mhm.
Yeah. And
Absolutely, and
yeah, yeah,
same thing
please.
with therapy. Um, even though therapy is taking more of this mindset-based approach, it tends to focus a lot on your past, which can be helpful again to a certain degree, but you need some new tools around food too. Most of us are not taught about like how to eat properly and how a normal natural eater eats intuitively. And so that's something I also work with people on is really making sure that they understand these key tools on how to listen to their body and their hunger and fullness, how to eat things in moderation, which is something that therapy doesn't teach or dietitians don't teach.
Mhm.
Dietitians, I'd say, also focus a lot on the what to eat, but not the why are we eating so much in the first place.
Yep, exactly. So like, okay. So one more thing I want to ask here, like, you help people feel normal and in control around any food. So that's really bold and honestly, I mean, very freeing also. So,
Mhm.
but some listeners might wonder, like, is full food freedom, full fruit, I'm so sorry, full food freedom really possible after years of restriction and binging?
Great question, and I have clients ask me this all of the time. I've worked with people who are in their late 70s, and they definitely think that for sure too, but anyone can think this at any age. But
Yeah.
what we know about the brain is that
Mm,
the brain is neuroplastic, meaning it can change at any point in time. It is a myth that they used to think our brain, once we got to the age of 5, it was just formed and that's how it was, and good luck. But we now know that's not true. The saying of "you can't teach an old dog new tricks" is not true.
mm.
At
Oh,
any age, our brain can change. It's always updating, rewiring itself, changing, and we need that to happen because if we were 50, 60, 70 years old and our brain was the same, that wouldn't allow us to learn and adapt. And we would die a lot quicker in the wild
yeah.
as humans if we weren't able to learn and adapt. So we're constantly learning, growing, changing. And I'll offer that most people, when they think this, the reason that they've been stuck is just because they've been trying the wrong tools. They might have thought, well, I've been trying and working on these habits for all these years, but
Mm,
if you're using the wrong tool to build a house, you're using a spoon to try to build the foundation of the house, it's not going to work very well. And it's going to take a really, really long time and it's probably going to crumble. So instead, we need to take a new approach with new foundations and really address our brain and our psychology from the inside out instead of just using these quick fixes that haven't worked.
exactly. Understood. Okay. And like, what does this normal eating look like when someone heals their relationship with the food?
Mhm. So something I used to say all the time in my journey with food was I just want to eat normally again. I don't want to think about food. I don't want to stress about food. I don't feel anxious about food. I just want to be like these normal eaters. And to me, what a normal eater is, first, I'll say normal is subjective. There is no one such thing as a normal eater. But what I mean by this is these are the people that we see that listen to their hunger and then they stop when they're full. They can leave food behind on their plates. They don't have a problem tossing away the last few bites. They're not cleaning their plates. They are able to have a half of a cookie or a birthday cake and just move on without stressing about it. They're not worried about, I need to get more. When am I going to get cake again? Diet starts tomorrow. There are people who, they might deal with some hard emotions, but they're not using food to solve their emotions. They're either going to other things, which may or may not be helpful, but they're not using food to try to calm themselves. And they still have ups and downs in their life, like any other human, but food is just something they use for nourishment and occasionally pleasure, but not much more than that.
Okay, got it. So, like the idea of neutralizing food, or I mean, removing the emotional charge is really powerful.
Mhm.
Huh. So here's a tough one. Like, many people listening might be caught in the secret cycle. So they look
Mhm.
successful, they eat clean and in public, and but the binges happen in private. I mean, we
Mhm.
often do, right? We say everything, but I mean, when we are on our couch, in our room, uh, I mean, binges happen in private, as I mentioned. So,
Mhm.
what would you say to someone who is listening right now who feels
Mhm.
deeply alone in this?
Mhm. First, there are people that can help you get out, one. But the second thing is, I really try to remind people that all we're doing is eating food. And there's nothing wrong with eating food. Yes, you might be eating more food than your body needs, and there might be some shame around it, but you're not inherently doing anything wrong. No one is kicking around puppies here. No one is, beating their child. We're just eating food. And so,
Yeah.
really taking away the guilt of, oh my gosh, I'm doing something horribly wrong. It's like, no, you're eating food. Like, it's okay. Yes, again, it has some consequences. Yes, it might not feel good. But we want to take away that shame because
Mm,
I call this the shame bubble. And when we're in the shame bubble, we can't see a way out of it. We're just stuck and we're alone. And it makes it really hard to look compassionately and curiously at our eating habits, which is what we need to do in order to get out of them. So the longer we are in the shame bubble and we stay hidden, the longer you're going to have these habits and the more ashamed you're going to be. So that doesn't mean you have to go into your life and tell everyone about your binge eating, but it does mean you have to first start acknowledging for yourself when you binge. So don't just shove it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Really start to look at, why might I have binge there? What was going on? What was I thinking? Was there a certain food that triggered me? Like really getting insights around that. But then the second thing is really repeating to yourself over and over and over again, I'm not doing anything wrong with food. I'm allowed to enjoy food because something that came up for me in my journey was I had this perception on the outside of this perfectly healthy eater. I would order the salad with dressing on the side at
mm,
the restaurant, and then I'd go home and I'd eat 2 bars of chocolate alone in my kitchen. And so I didn't want anyone to see that I wasn't this healthy person. So for me, I had to let go of this identity that I was the perfect healthy friend. I was the perfect healthy daughter or family member, that
mm,
I was just a normal person and I was allowed to enjoy food pleasure too, because that will help us so we start feeling comfortable having a cookie with other people. And I can tell you, it is infinitely more times enjoyable to sit down with your best friend and enjoy a cookie than to be eating it in 3 seconds alone in your kitchen. That is not what we want, and the good news is once we actually start enjoying food again and we get the pleasure out of it, we leave that experience feeling satisfied, and then we don't
mm.
feel the need to keep eating and eating and eating because we got the pleasure we actually want from that food.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay. And what's the one step they can take this week to start breaking free? What do you say?
So I would really recommend getting that audio that I mentioned in the show notes of how to stop a binge in its tracks. And this is something that I want you to, you can download it on Spotify, on YouTube.
Mm,
But once you have it there, make sure to actually use it because it has helped hundreds of people, probably thousands at this point, help stop a binge in its tracks. And once we can do that, that's when we start to rewire our brain. So the most important thing we can do is to not act on our urges, and it sounds simple on the surface. If you want to stop binge eating, just stop binge eating. But really, ultimately, the sooner we learn these tools on, okay, I get these cravings. How can I sit through this craving and not act on it? The sooner you can become this normal, natural eater who doesn't have the strong desire to binge anymore.
mm. Amazing. That's really amazing. Great. Great. So, Amber, like, thank you so much for showing us that path to healing that doesn't lie in punishment, but in understanding. So, uh, that our brain are not betraying us; they are just running old scripts. So, and the good news is like we can rewrite those scripts. So, thank you so
Mhm.
much for sharing all these.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for everyone who is listening, if you have ever battled binge eating, emotional eating, or just felt out of control with food, then please know that you are not broken. You are human, and health is possible. So, with this, Amber, if someone would like to connect with you, how they can connect?
Mhm. So I also have a podcast called Become a Confident Eater. That's another great free resource. Otherwise, you can go to my website, theconfidenteater.org, and there are ways to work with me there. I do private coaching, so you can work with me one on one to get the step by step plan and support to stop binge eating. I also have free trainings if you are on my email list. So, theconfidenteater.org is the best place to find the next steps.
Amazing, amazing, great. So, dear listeners, start small, get curious about the habits, your habits basically, and remember that it's not about control, it's about compassion and repattering. So, until next time, keep nourishing your mind, body, and your life. So, this is your host, Avik, signing off from Healthy Pet, Healthy Life. Stay kind to yourself. So, thank you so much.